He was looked down on for appearing weak, but he shocks everyone when they find out he's actually the master of the strongest hunter clan. The story begins with a group of kids as they dream of becoming treasure hunters. We learn that treasure hunters explore ruins known as vaults to obtain the riches and relics hidden inside, but they risk their lives fighting against monsters known as phantoms. We meet a boy named Cry as he heads to an interview where the strongest clan is recruiting new members. As he waits in line, a girl named Ruta introduces herself, and she notes that she has always been a solo hunter, but after having trouble with a vault called the White Wolf's Den, she decided to try and join a party. A hunter named Greg overhears them and tells her there's no way she can take on the den as a level 3 hunter. He calls her an amateur, saying she won't be able to join the First Steps since it's one of the leading clans in the capital, which makes her angry, and she notes that there aren't any requirements to join the clan. She takes out her daggers and prepares to fight, but a man tells them to stop, saying if they continue to cause a disturbance, then they won't be recruited. After that, Ruta is surprised to see so many hunters, since she has never been to such a place, but Cry notes it's his 5th time. We learn that the clan is made up of a number of different parties, and Cry mentions that the Ark Brave party are the strongest ones there, saying that their 6 members were able to conquer a level 7 treasure vault. He notes that if their leader Ark accepts a hunter into their party, they're guaranteed to be successful, but he mentions that they haven't accepted a new member through one of these interviews. Ruta sees an empty table and asks Cry about it, but Greg interrupts once again, saying it's for the founder of the First Steps. He calls it the Grievers table, and Cry thinks about how the Grievers came to the capital a few years ago, but they quickly rose to power, becoming one of the most famous parties, with their official name being the Grieving Souls, and it's the party of his childhood friends. Greg notes that it's the first time the Grievers are recruiting new members in years, which is why so many hunters have gathered. A boy named Gilbert suddenly starts yelling, demanding to know where the Grievers are, revealing that he's already at level 4, but a girl named Tino interrupts him, saying he isn't needed there. She prepares to teach him a lesson, saying that she's the one who should be in the Grieving Souls, but a man stops her, since their orders are to settle things peacefully, but everyone gathers around and clears the area to see them fight. Cry tells Ruta they should go outside, not wanting to get caught up in the fight, and they start sneaking away. As the fight is about to begin, Gilbert charges up his sword, but Tino notices Cry, and she rushes to him instead. She calls him Master, and we learn that he's the leader of the Grieving Souls and the master of the First Steps. We go back to when Cry and his friends first arrived in the capital, where they complete the beginner vaults in record time. We see Cry about to be eaten by a monster, but he's saved by his friend, and they praise him for acting as bait, but in reality, he had no idea there was a monster behind him. All of them dreamed of becoming treasure hunters, but compared to his 5 friends who were insanely talented, he thinks he's just ordinary, and he knows that if he keeps following them, he will just be a burden to them. He thinks his friends are too kind to tell him he's weak, so he decides to leave the party, but when he tells them about his decision, they tell him to become their leader instead. Cry tells Ark he was late because he overslept, but Ark thinks he's joking, and Tino doesn't seem to like him. Ark thinks Cry was blending in with the hunters to assess them, but Cry notes that he really just overslept. Tino thinks Cry should kick out Ark from the clan because he's rude, and Ark asks Cry if he has found any good candidates. Cry thinks he already has enough members, but he asks Ark if he's willing to take on a new hunter. Ark mentions he trusts his judgment, saying he will take anyone that Cry picks, but it makes a girl from his party angry. Tino thinks Cry is going to recommend her, so she notes that she would rather stay with him. Gilbert causes another scene, and Cry asks him if he's with another party, but he notes it doesn't matter. He thinks Gilbert won't be an asset to him in his current state, but he might become strong if Ark's party trains him. Cry knows he has no eye for a person's talent, which means no matter who he chooses, it's all based on luck. He mentions the most important thing for a hunter is to never give up, and he tells Gilbert to show them his strength, because if he's weak, he'll put everyone around him in danger. Cry reveals after he became a hunter, he hasn't lost a fight, which shocks Gilbert, but it's really just because he hasn't had a proper fight. He takes off his ring, telling everyone that the person who retrieves it will be recommended to Ark, and as he throws the ring towards the hunters, Gilbert catches it, but Tino instantly kicks him and sends him flying. The hunters start fighting for the ring, and Cry mentions it's a relic, so he'll give the ring to the person who manages to collect it. The next day, the vice master of the first steps named Eva tells Cry he made the front page of the newspaper because of the fight that happened over the ring. He wonders if any civilians were hurt, so she tells him no, but mentions that they did get a call from the Explorers Association. He asks her what Ark thought of the news article, and she mentions he just laughed while reading it, so Cry tells her to charge the repair bill to him. Eva notes that he relies too much on Ark, and she tells him that the Explorers Association asked him to visit, so he knows if he neglects the matter, the chief will visit them instead. He mentions he can't go out since he doesn't have a bodyguard, and even his face-transforming relic is broken, but Eva tells him he won't be attacked during the day. Cry goes to the Explorers Association, where he instantly begs the Chief Gark to forgive him, and the girl beside them calms him down. She gives him a book, and Gark mentions that even though a report about the trouble he caused wasn't filed, a clan as big as the First Steps should be an example for the other hunters. Cry knows that the association receives a lot of requests, but some of them have low rewards or are extremely difficult, which makes it so that no one will accept them, and the hunters consider these requests as chores. Cry realizes Gark wants him to accept one of the missions, so he decides to do it since he owes Gark, but he mentions he didn't do anything that bad. Gark allows him to choose a mission of his liking, so Cry goes through the book and selects a level 3 request, thinking it looks like an easy rescue mission, but after he leaves, Gark is impressed, thinking he chose the most dangerous job on purpose. Cry goes to find Ark so he can give him the mission, but Tino reveals he was called away and all the other members are also busy. She shows that she ended up with his ring, and she's happy she can keep it. Cry asks her if she's free, which makes her happy, since she thinks he wants to spend time with her, but when he tells her about the mission, she instantly runs away. Cry summons a creature from his chain which retrieves her, and she mentions she thought they were going to have fun together, but he's forcing her to do a chore instead. She mentions that she's only level 4, so she can't rescue 5 people on her own, but she gets even more angry as Cry tells Gilbert and the others to accompany her. We go back 6 years, to when Cry and his friends first arrived at the association to register as a party, but Cry is scared to go inside. He thinks he will just hold everyone back, so they should just leave, but his friend Luke kicks the door open, announcing that he's the strongest swordsman in the world. He notes how Cry always told him that a true warrior doesn't need a weapon, which is why he uses a wooden sword to fight. The receptionist tells Cry to select a party name and symbol, but they haven't thought about it, so the receptionist notes that the name will reflect the spirit of their party, telling them to choose wisely. Cry decides to use the opportunity to show everyone how bad of a leader he is, so he chooses the name Grieving Souls, which everyone doesn't like, since they're supposed to be a hero party, but a name like the Grieving Souls will make them seem antisocial. Cry says he isn't cut out to be their leader, but they all change their minds and decide that they like it so that he doesn't leave them. Back in the present, Greg is still shocked that Cry is the clan master, and he realizes that Cry is a level 8 treasure hunter known as the Thousand Tricks. Gilbert refuses to believe Cry is the strongest hunter in the capital, because he doesn't even look like he trains, and Tino says she can't team up with Gilbert since he's all talk, but Cry thinks about how he's also just talk. Cry asks them if they're willing to help, but Gilbert refuses to listen to him since he doesn't acknowledge him, so Cry decides to leave him out. As Cry is about to leave, Gilbert tells him to fight him, saying that if he loses, he will join them, because he refuses to follow someone weaker than him, but Cry tells him to fight Tino, since she's their party's leader. Gilbert mentions he let his guard down when he fought her before, but he isn't going to make the same mistake, and he tells Cry he'll fight him next after he defeats Tino. Cry reveals that Tino is also a level 4 hunter, and she notes that even though she's nothing compared to Cry, she still won't lose to Gilbert. She throws away her weapons so that she won't accidentally kill him, which worries Ruta, and Greg mentions if they fight head-on, Tino won't stand a chance since she's a thief. Cry knows that even though their levels are the same, there's still a large gap in their skill, and Tino is more experienced in one-on-one fights. He thinks Gilbert's Purgatory Sword will decide the result of their fight, but Gilbert throws it away, saying he doesn't need a weapon to fight an unarmed girl. Tino notes that if she wins, Cry will get ice cream with her, and he can't resist after seeing the look on her face. As the fight begins, Tino rushes toward Gilbert, and even though he dodges her first attack, she still manages to kick him and send him flying. Gilbert refuses to give up, and he tries to punch her, but she puts him in a leg lock, saying she went easy on him. She decides to teach him a lesson so he won't disrespect Cry again, and she hits him in the back of the head, making him fall to the ground, surprising Greg and Ruta with how strong she is. Gilbert thinks about how when he was young, he was stronger than everyone around him, and after going to the capital, he joined a party, and as he kept conquering the vaults, he thought he could never be defeated. Tino mentions that if he still wants to fight, he should use his sword, but when he refuses to pick it up, she tells him he shouldn't let his pride be the death of him, which makes him realize if they were fighting seriously, he would already be dead. Cry notes that Gilbert quit his old party because the skill gap was too wide, and Cry mentions he went through the same thing with his own party, but they didn't abandon each other. Cry knows his friends were the ones who didn't abandon him, and Gilbert is shocked that even though the Grieving Souls consists of the strongest hunters in the capital, they still show mercy. Cry kicks Gilbert's sword and activates its power, which shocks him that Cry can wield the sword, because even he isn't able to summon such strong flames, but Cry was able to do it without even holding it in his hands. We learn that the substance that is said to be the foundation of the world is called mana material, and it's present everywhere but invisible to the naked eye. Treasure vaults are places created from concentrated mana material, and the White Wolf's Den is the vault, where Cry is sending Tino and the others. There was originally a wolf monster called the Silver Moon that lived there, but they were hunted to extinction, which caused a treasure vault to appear, along with the phantom of a full-blooded wolf. Cry finds the vault terrifying, but he thinks Tino and the others will be fine since they're at a similar level. Eva asks him about the Purgatory Sword, and he mentions it's such an easy relic to use that even Gilbert, who has no knowledge about how it works, can still use some of its power. He wonders if Gilbert will sell him the sword, and Eva mentions he shouldn't waste money on it since he already has similar relics, but he notes that all relics are different. She tells him he should be careful with his spending, no matter how much money he gets from the Grievers, and Cry thinks about how everyone in the Grievers gets an equal amount of money they make from hunts, even if they didn't contribute. Cry sees that he forgot to charge his relic, so he goes to a girl who charges it for him, and the man with her tells him about a stray level 3 phantom that appeared on the northern highway, where it wiped out a caravan, which was escorted by 3 level 3 guards. He mentions the phantom took the shape of a wolf, and it came from the White Wolf's Den, which worries Cry, but he tells himself that Tino and the others will be fine. They note that the phantoms are getting stronger, so there have been talks about changing their certification levels, because another party went missing a few days ago that was led by a level 5 hunter named Rudolph. Cry reads the quest again, and he realizes he forgot to read the part where it mentions the people who need to be rescued are Rudolph and 5 other level 5 hunters, and the others are shocked when Cry mentions he sent Tino to the Wolf's Den. After he leaves, he thinks they'll be fine as long as Gilbert has his Purgatory Sword, but he becomes worried because he doesn't know if Gilbert charged the sword after he used it. Meanwhile, Tino tells the others that the quest won't be easy since it was given to them by Cry, so it's why she wrote her will before she left. They all think Cry must have selected them for a reason, but he really just picked them all randomly. Cry thinks they can just come back if things get out of control, but he knows Tino won't retreat no matter the situation, so he decides to catch up to them before they reach the vault, and he plans to tell Ark to complete the quest once they return. He opens a secret room and he packs as many relics as he can, looking at a particular safe. As he prepares to leave, Eva sees him trying to go out. She knows he's worried about the others, and she's surprised to see he took the Citrus slime relic, but he assures her he isn't stupid enough to have something that's illegal. But he thinks about how all his offensive relics are out of mana, so he needs to bring it as a last resort. He uses another relic to fly out, and Eva worries about him since it's ridiculously hard to control. Meanwhile, Tino and the others are attacked by a phantom, and they're shocked because it's wearing armor and has a sword, but Tino is determined to meet Cry's expectations of her. We go back to when the Grieving Souls first started working in the capital, and Luke is surprised that his sword broke against a phantom. As they talk about how they defeated a Cyclops, a drunk man overhears them, and he thinks they must be making up a story, because there's no way a level 4 phantom would appear in a level 1 vault, but he's shocked when they show him the Cyclops' eye. Back in the present, Tino and the others manage to defeat the wolf, but they're surprised there was such a strong phantom in a level 3 vault. Greg asks Gilbert why he didn't use his flames during the fight, so he mentions the sword is out of mana, realizing it's because Cry used it. Ruta thinks they should retreat, and Greg notes the people they're tasked with rescuing must be dead already, but Tino refuses to change the plan, saying the people are still alive. She thinks everything is happening just as Cry predicted, and she tells Gilbert that Cry purposely made his sword run out of mana, so he would realize he shouldn't depend on a relic. They come across a group of wolves, and Gilbert decides to take the lead, saying if he can get rid of the ones with the bows and guns, they can easily defeat the rest. Tino calls him stupid, but he mentions that even without mana, his sword is stronger than a normal one, but she tells him Cry trusted her as the leader, so she will make sure everyone survives. She notes that she and Ruta will attract the wolves, telling Greg and Gilbert to use the opportunity to attack them from behind. She mentions that she'll never use anyone to protect herself, but we see Cry wishing for at least her to survive, even if she has to use the other members as a shield. They manage to defeat the wolves, and Tino knows that even though their opponents are much stronger, they still have an advantage since they can rely on teamwork, while the wolves have no concept of working together. She thinks about how even though their party was made on the spot, they still work well together, and she thinks it was all planned by Cry. They're attacked by more wolves, and while fighting them, Gilbert remembers the time he left his old party, but he realizes they were doing the best that they could, and he never considered their feelings. Gilbert slashes the wolf with the help of Greg, and he's happy to finally have strong allies. As they move forward, Tino senses the boss, and Greg wonders if they should retreat, but Tino notes that they have managed to make it so far without getting hurt, so she thinks they'll figure something out against the boss. She tells him they need to take risks sometimes, but he notes that once a hunter reaches level 4, they can live an easy life by conquering low-level vaults, and he avoids fights he can't win because he has seen his comrades die. Tino mentions how Greg has been a hunter for a long time, but he still came to join the first steps, so it must be because he wants to achieve something, and she thinks it's the reason why Cry selected him. She tells Greg and Gilbert that the mission is Cry's way of helping them, but Ruta wonders why she was selected, and Tino wonders if it was because of her chest. They come across the boss, and Tino sees that it isn't wearing a helmet, so she thinks it must be its weak point. She tells everyone to stop its movements, and they rush towards it, but it sends Greg flying and breaks his sword. As it's about to hit him with its axe, Ruta pushes him out of the way, and Tino prepares to attack. She jumps up in the air, and even though the wolf hits her leg, she still defeats it by stabbing its neck. Tino uses a potion to heal her leg, and Greg is surprised his sword broke during the fight, but Gilbert mentions they should be happy that they survived. Tino gives Greg another sword, but 4 more wolves suddenly appear and attack them, which shocks them since there's more than one boss in the vault. They have no idea what to do, and Tino shows them the path they can use to escape, but it gets blocked by one of the wolves. Gilbert and Greg decide to stay back to act as decoys, so Tino and Ruta can escape, but Tino refuses to sacrifice anyone. She tells them to attack the wolf's eyes, so Gilbert rushes towards one of them, and as he blocks its attack, Greg stabs its leg with his sword, but it blows them away. Ruta throws her knives at its eyes, and Tino remembers when Cry taught her how to use his ring relic. She uses it to blind the wolf, and Gilbert uses the opportunity to finish it off, but it sends him flying into a wall. He apologizes to Tino for attacking without thinking, but she says it's her fault because her instructions weren't clear. The wolves are about to attack them, and they think it's all over, but Cry suddenly crashes in, smashing one of the wolves into a wall. The wolf gets back up and tries to attack him, but it's shocked to see there's a shield protecting him. Cry uses his ring to fire a huge blast, and Greg is amazed at the power of a level 8 hunter. But everyone is surprised when the wolf is completely fine, and Cry knows that his shooting rings aren't that powerful. He's confused after seeing that the wolves have weapons, and he just wants to get away safely, so he prepares to use Citri's slime, which scares the wolves. But the vial is empty, so he creates a smoke screen as a distraction, and he tells everyone to run away. As they run, Ruta notes how Cry seems to be slow, but she thinks he's just matching their pace since Tino is injured, but he's really just bad at running. Tino also thinks he's doing it on purpose to protect her, and she remembers the first time they met. She was about to be kidnapped by some men, but the grieving souls saved her just in time, and ever since that day, she has always admired them. The group manages to escape the wolves, and Ruta tells Cry if it weren't for Tino, they wouldn't have survived, but he apologizes for sending them on such a dangerous mission. He uses a relic to heal Tino, and he tells everyone to think of a way to get out of the vault instead of thinking about fighting the bosses, but he gets worried since he has no idea where to go. We go back to the past, when Cry shows all the relics he bought to his friends, which impresses everyone, and his friend Liz asks him to pick one out for her, but Luke says it's not fair, and tells him he should choose one for all of them. Citri shows interest in a bag, and Cry notes it's a magic bag that can store an unlimited number of items, so she thinks it must have cost a lot, but he reveals it was actually cheap, because it only holds chocolates. Liz tries a bracelet, but she suddenly falls over, and Cry mentions it's a labyrinth ring, which messes up her sense of balance. Luke tries out a cool sword, but he starts to lose his mind, and Cry mentions that it's cursed, so they realize that all the relics are trash, but they take them as training items. Back in the present, Cry wonders why he's leading, even though he has no clue where to go. He thinks Tino or Ruta should take his place since they're thieves, and Gilbert asks him if they're headed for the exit, but Tino tells him it's a part of his training to read Cry's intentions, and she notes that they aren't heading toward the exit, which shocks everyone. She mentions that based on the map she saw before they left, she has a rough idea of the layout of the vault, so she knows the path that they are on doesn't lead to the exit, and she says that they need to return to the boss room if they want to leave. As they move forward, Ruta notes that even though she knows Cry is testing them, she still asks him where he's taking them, but he doesn't have any idea, and he wonders why they're all following him. As he thinks about turning back, everyone rushes ahead, and Tino mentions it's why they should have trusted him. He wonders what she means, and he's surprised that they managed to find Rudolph's party, who thanks everyone for rescuing them, but Tino notes he should thank Cry, since he was the one who led them there. Ruta mentions she has given them potions, but they're still losing energy and they need to eat, so Cry uses his magic bag to give everyone chocolate. Greg notes that when he heard a party of level 5 hunters went missing, he thought it must have been a mistake, and Rudolph mentions they weren't expecting the enemy to be so strong. But Gilbert is confused, because even though the wolves were strong, he doesn't think they would have been a problem for a group of level 5 hunters, but Rudolph reveals they were attacked by only one phantom, and it had a skull for a face. Everyone is shocked hearing this, and he mentions the phantom is probably the curse of the silver moon that lingers in the vault. He thinks that the grudge of the monsters that were slain by humans was amplified within the vault, which is what gave them power, but he notes that the phantom that attacked them was on another level, and he thinks it might even be as strong as the Thousand Swords. Cry thinks about how Luke is known as the Thousand Swords, since he mastered all the forms of swordsmanship, and he's so strong that he can cut down his enemies with a wooden sword. He knows the phantoms are strong, but he doesn't think they could be on par with Luke, because if such a phantom existed, Luke would have already defeated it. Ruta asks Cry what they should do next, and he says they should get out of the vault, but he notes that he made Tino the leader of the mission, so they'll do whatever she decides, saying it's part of her training, but he's really just scared of leading everyone. Tino agrees that they should leave the vault, and she mentions her leg is completely healed, so she can run at full speed, but Cry reminds her to keep the others in mind, but he's just worried about himself since he can't run as fast as her. They're about to reach the exit, and Rudolph notes if the phantom attacks them, he will hold it off so everyone can escape, but Tino refuses to abandon him. She notes that as long as Cry is with them, everyone will be safe, but Cry knows he can only carry Tino and run away if something happens. He sees he has only 5 safety rings left, so he'll be in danger if he gets hit more than 5 times. He doesn't have any other relics to use, which makes him realize it will be over for him if they're attacked. They hear the wolves howling, and the phantom suddenly appears in front of them, which scares everyone, but they're even more shocked when they see that there's a second one. But the one behind suddenly kicks the other one, sending him flying into the wall, and Cry realizes that it's Liz. He tells her to remove her mask, and everyone is relieved that she's a human, wondering who she is, but she gets angry that they don't know her, even though they're with Cry. She mentions she went to the capital to meet him, but Eva told her he had gone to the wolf den. She gets angry at Tino, because even though she's her disciple, she couldn't defeat such a weak phantom. Gilbert tries to interrupt them, but Liz sends him flying, and she turns back to Tino, who falls to her knees. Liz starts yelling at her, asking her why she's so weak, and Tino apologizes to her, but Cry tells her she did a good job because she completed the mission, so he tells Liz to go easy on her. The Phantom gets back up, and it summons one of the wolves that has a Gatling gun. Liz gets mad she's being underestimated because of how weak Tino was, and the wolf starts to shoot its gun at her, but she uses her insane speed to catch them out of the air, arranging them all around her. She notes that she can't be hit by weapons of the old, and she yells at Tino, calling her incompetent for being scared of such a weak weapon, but she jumps into the air, saying the wolf can be defeated if it's attacked from above, and she blows it up in a single hit. The Phantom tries to attack with its sword, but she catches it with her hand. She starts to beat it to a pulp, while she continues to yell at Tino, which makes her tear up, and Cry feels bad for her. He smiles as he thinks about how Rudolph said the Phantom was as strong as Luke, and he knows that besides him, all the Grievers are insanely strong, because they've honed their skills by competing against each other. They all return to the capital, and Gilbert mentions that he will give his sword to Cry, because he plans to start his training from the beginning and train with his old party. Greg tells him to apologize to them for his past behavior, and he mentions he's indebted to all of them, asking them to give his gratitude to Cry. He hopes to be able to catch bullets like Liz, but they tell him it's impossible for him, and Tino mentions that if he really wants to be like her, then he should know that their masks are specially made. We go back to when Cry ordered the masks for the party, but he messed it up and forgot to get holes for their eyes, but everyone goes along with it, thinking he did it on purpose, because if they can get around while having it on, they will become even stronger. Back in the present, Cry searches everywhere for the slime, but he can't find it anywhere, so he tries to just forget about it. We go back a year, to when Citri gave Cry the slime to hold onto, and we learn she's the party's genius alchemist. Cry tries to open the vial, but Citri tells him to be careful, because it might destroy the capital if it's released, so Cry realizes how dangerous it is. Cry looks around everywhere for the slime, as he notes that when he tried to use it in the den, the vial was empty, so he thinks it must still be in his room. He remembers how he put it into his special safe, so it's impossible for it to have gotten away. He concludes that the vial was always empty, and he thinks Citri was just pranking him, but he still has a bad feeling. He wakes up tired the next day, because he's still worried about the slime, and he runs into Eva, who tells him the association wants his report on the wolf's den, but he notes that Tino was the leader, so they should ask her instead, but Eva mentions that Tino is busy training with Liz. Cry asks her if there has been any movement in the capital, still thinking about the slime, but she doesn't know what he's talking about, so he tells her not to worry and goes to check on Tino. After he leaves, Eva notes how there have been all sorts of anomalies going on in the capital, but Cry seems to be able to accurately predict the things that happen. Cry heads to the training room, where he sees a level 6 hunter named Sven outside, and we learn he's the leader of the Obsidian Cross Party. He tells Cry he needs to stop Liz, because Tino will die if they don't do something. Cry thinks he's exaggerating, but when he opens the door, he sees Liz standing over Tino's body, wondering if this is all she can do. Liz prepares to finish her off, but Cry interrupts her. Liz notes that Tino has more talent than her, but she wonders why she's so weak. Cry tells her to call it a day, but Tino suddenly grabs onto Liz, saying she can still move, so they decide to continue their training. Cry realizes there's no stopping them, and Sven mentions how the northern route has been locked down because there was an attack from multiple phantoms. Cry also remembers how things were strange at the wolf's den, so he wonders if it's why Gark wanted to see him. He wishes Ark was back so he can get him to do all the work, so he thinks he just needs to stall for time. He comes up with an idea and tells Sven to visit Gark in his place, saying he's too busy to go himself. As he leaves, Sven's companion Henrik wonders why Cry stays back, while everyone else is out on missions, but Sven tells him he's new, calling Cry a monster, and he tells Henrik not to judge Cry by his laid-back appearance. Meanwhile at the association, Gark wonders about the cause of the anomaly at the den, thinking Cry must know something, because it's the only vault he has visited in a long time. We see a secret lab, and we meet a mage named Noctis, but he can't believe such a high-level hunter like Cry has become suspicious of them, thinking they can't underestimate him, so he decides to call his right hand Sophia to deal with him. We learn that the mages of the capital's Akashic Tower are the ones behind the vault anomalies, and we learn they're tapping into the power flowing through the ley lines of the vault for research that will allow them to create their own vaults at will. We see Cry as he watches in terror as a giant slime sets fire and destroys the capital, but he wakes up and realizes it was just a nightmare. He finds Liz in his bed, and she asks him if he's free, so he agrees to do something with her. We see Gark visiting the first steps, but when Liz sees him, she tells him to get lost, not wanting him to ruin her date with Cry. They start to fight, so Cry decides to talk to Gark's assistant Kana. She asks him if he noticed anything strange from the den, but he mentions he was more worried about something else. She tries to ask him about it, but he knows he can't tell her about the slime, and he tells her to ask Gark for help with the anomalies. Meanwhile, Liz teases Gark for being rusty, telling him he fell off, so he decides to teach her a lesson. We learn he was a first-rate level 7 hunter, and he had the nickname of being the War Demon, but Cry interrupts their fight, telling Gark they're done with their business, so Liz gets ready to go out, and Eva freaks out seeing all the damage from the fight. Cry and Liz head out into the city, and we learn that Liz and the other grievers were at a level 8 vault called the Night Palace. She notes that the phantoms there were strong, so Cry asks her how they compared to the boss from the Wolf's Den, but she doesn't even remember it because it was so weak. Liz suddenly tackles a man, saying he was staring at them, but Cry gets her to let him go and he apologizes to the man. The man quickly runs away, and Liz thinks Cry allowed it on purpose, thinking he's a good actor, but Cry is just confused. We see the man after he gets away, thinking Cry was giving him a warning, so he wonders how much Cry knows about their plan. Cry sends the Obsidian Cross to the Association in his place, which makes Gark angry, because he wanted to question Cry himself. But he knows the party is skilled, so he gives them the task of investigating the Wolf's Den. Meanwhile, Liz goes out with Cry again, but he tells her to calm down, reminding her that it's not a date. She asks him if he's looking for something, so he explains that Eva's report mentioned that people have been disappearing from the area, and even though such incidents aren't rare in these parts of the city, he thinks they need to take it seriously, because Citri's slime might be involved. He also mentions Eva told him about a new ice cream shop nearby, so he wants to check it out, which makes Liz excited. We see the man from the other day watching them, and he starts freaking out, thinking Cry and Liz let him go before, just so they could follow him. He notes that the ice cream shop is actually the secret research base for the Akashic Tower, so he thinks he needs to close the shop until Cry leaves, but Sophia suddenly arrives. She sees him panicking and wonders what's wrong, but before he can respond, Liz knocks on the shop's door. When no one answers, she gets impatient and tries to break it down, but Cry stops her, suggesting the shop might have run out of stock, so he convinces her to leave, even though she mentions she can still smell something sweet inside. They return to the clan office, where Liz is annoyed they didn't get ice cream, but Cry is still just worried about the slime. He asks her if Citri has returned from the Night Palace, so Liz offers her help instead since Citri won't be back for a while, but he mentions that he needs Citri's expertise on a certain magical creature. Eva arrives to tell him that she has chosen members for the investigation of the Wolf's Den, while Sven's team is already on site, but Ark isn't back yet. She mentions the investigation will begin tomorrow, and they're also sending a relic expert to check the vault, but Cry is just relieved he doesn't need to go, and he trusts her to manage it. Meanwhile, the Akashic Tower members have a meeting about how Cry has discovered their base in the capital, and one of the mages named Flick suggests that they stay calm, but since Cry's true intentions are unclear, they aren't sure how to proceed. Noctis asks Sophia for her opinion, and she shocks everyone by suggesting they should fight, but Flick reminds her that Cry is level 8. Sophia still thinks they shouldn't back down, because it's the perfect opportunity to test their defense system, and if they manage to wipe out Cry's party, there will be no one left to oppose them. Noctis likes her idea and tells her to do as she pleases, since Cry has already noticed them, so they can't expect to escape without a scratch. We see Tino walking through the city, and she's surprised to see so many hunters at the guild, but another hunter tells her they're collaborating with the association to investigate the Wolf's Den. Tino thinks there are way too many people, but the man mentions Cry wanted Ark to lead the mission, and since he's one of the top level 7 hunters in the world, all the hunters there are just to make up for him not being available. Cry arrives with Eva, and he's also surprised to see so many people. Eva explains that they're all replacements for Ark, and Cry worries about the cost of hiring everyone, so he suggests cutting the number in half, but the hunters worry about facing a threat serious enough to require Ark, which makes Cry wonder what's going on in the vault. Eva reassures him they can afford the extra hunters because Gark is helping pay, but he worries about sending them all, since Citri's slime might be in the vault. Liz suddenly arrives and mocks them, claiming she can handle the job on her own, so she asks Cry to allow her to go, but he refuses because he worries she will cause trouble with the other groups there, and he knows she will drag Tino along with her, who still hasn't fully recovered from her training. Eva asks Cry if he will lead the mission himself, which makes the hunters happy, but he thinks Sven is better suited for the role, and he notes he still has an important task to finish, so he will join them later, but he really just plans to show up only when the mission is nearly complete. As the party prepares to leave, Liz insists on going, but Cry tricks her by saying he has an important task for her. Before the hunters leave, they ask if there's anything they should be cautious about, and Cry warns them to watch out for slime-like creatures, which surprises them since slimes don't usually appear in the wolves' den. Meanwhile, at the Akashic Tower base, Noctis learns that there are hunters approaching, which makes them worried, but Sophia believes they can handle it. She mentions that from the grieving souls, only Cry, Liz and Citri are in the capital. She says they can easily deal with Liz by stopping her physical attacks, and Cry is a strategist, so he can't use his full abilities without another party member to guide. Noctis notes that the real threat is Citri, but Sophia tells him her defense system will restrict her alchemy techniques, making it impossible to penetrate, but she notes that Citri has been snooping around their research, so they must take her out. Noctis gives her full authority to do as she pleases, and he even orders his men to follow her every command. Meanwhile in the den, Sven and his team notice everything seems normal, making Henrik wonder why they even accepted the quest, but Sven reminds him it was a direct order from Gark, so they didn't have a choice. Henrik complains they're just cleaning up after Cry's mess, but Sven tells them they will eventually understand how skilled Cry is. He receives a message about Cry's warning, so he gets Henrik to blow the emergency whistle, which makes all the other teams evacuate outside, but another hunter named Gain thinks he's wasting their time over a slime. But Sven defends Cry by explaining his ability to see the future, and he recalls the time when Cry advised them to bring weapons to a flower viewing party, which later turned out to be a vault called the Prism Garden. Gain is shocked hearing this, and Sven reveals he's spent a lot on his communication stones, so he can always get the latest information. Meanwhile, Liz keeps bothering Cry, saying she wants to fight in front of him to show her true strength, but he tries to stall until the investigation is over. Citri suddenly arrives, and Liz wonders why she's back, but she notes that she had a bad feeling that something big was happening, so she came back to help Cry. We go back to their childhood, where Citri tells Cry she needs to make up for what the others lack, so they can continue enjoying life as hunters. She knows she isn't strong, but Cry suggests she take on a role that suits her best, which is how she became their alchemist. In the present, Citri explains to Cry how her slime evolved and improved, but she still considers it a failed experiment. She reassures him that he doesn't need to worry, because she has programmed it so that it won't attack either of them. Citri wonders how it could have escaped Cry's safe, and after investigating, she thinks that the slime must have learned to open the vault on its own, and it snuck out through the bath drain. She promises to take care of it, but she also mentions that if things continue the way they're going, the entire investigation team at the Wolves' Den will be wiped out. Sven learns that Cry and Liz won't be joining them until later, so he will need to lead everyone in their absence. He gathers all the hunters, and he asks if anyone has experience fighting slimes, but they laugh since they're considered weak, and one hunter even jokes that he might have killed a slime without even noticing. Sven asks them if anyone has brought tools to deal with slimes, so the group begins listing the various weaknesses of slimes and how they can easily defeat one. They're interrupted by Gain, who insists they resume exploring, and he mentions he isn't scared of a slime, so if one comes, he will deal with it himself, but everyone mocks him, saying he's the type who would die first. Sven even tells him to leave behind his personal information so they can avenge him after he dies, which makes him annoyed, and he dismisses their warnings, saying they're crazy for believing Cry, who didn't even show up. A girl named Talia introduces herself as an alchemist, which surprises Sven because he didn't think they had another alchemist besides Citri, so she reveals she worked in the clan's lab with Citri, where they researched on slimes. They ask if she knows of any slime weaknesses, so she shows them a drug, which should be able to kill any slime, putting everyone at ease. Meanwhile, Noctis contacts Sophia, who tells him they're up against less than 100 hunters, and most of them don't even have a title, so she thinks they will easily defeat them. Sven prepares an action plan, telling the hunters to secure the vault's interior as units, and to use whistles for communication. He tells them to be careful, and notes that those who aren't assigned to suppression should stay outside to assist with any rescues if necessary. After a while, reports come in that only a few wolf knights have been encountered, which makes Sven question Cry's ability to predict the future, but he notes they would be lucky if nothing happens. Gain complains they wasted too much time, while Henrik says that even though he doesn't know Cry well, he trusts in Sven's judgment. Gain goes into the forest, and he thinks if Ark had given the order, he would have trusted it, but with Cry sitting back in the capital, he doesn't feel the same. He suddenly hears a noise and assumes it's a wolf, but he's shocked to find two mages with a wolf knight that's chained up, and they have a suspicious-looking syringe. They talk about how Sophia is their master's favorite, even though she can't use magic properly, but Gain rushes at them, and he manages to take out one of them, while the other mage shoots fire at him, which he blocks using his shield. He knocks the mage out, but his arm still gets burned, and the mages wonder if it was Cry who sent him. But he denies it, and they inject the wolf with mana material, transforming it into a giant slime creature. They explain it's a phantom, which has been demonized to seek out high concentrations of mana, so it starts to attack Gain. The creature lets out a loud roar, drawing all the hunters to its location, where they find Gain, who's severely injured, and he confirms Cry was right about the slime. The creature soon appears, and Talia notes she has never seen such a big slime before. Sven notices it has slow movement, and he tries to organize the hunters, ordering the mages to create a diversion. He orders everyone to attack its legs, but even his own arrows don't affect the monster, so he tells Henrik to help Gain, who mentions how the mages injected a wolf knight to turn it into a slime, just as Cry had predicted. Sven realizes both physical and magical attacks don't affect it, so one of the hunters asks him what they should do. Sven notes that even if they can't defeat it, they can't run away. He tells everyone to focus on dodging its attacks, while he takes the drug from Talia, which she explains will cause the slime to self-destruct if the liquid touches the slime. Sven gets the slime's attention, and as it chases after him, it jumps high up into the air and surprises everyone, but Sven plants the container under where it will land. The slime bubbles up on contact, but it doesn't work, and Sven realizes it isn't a slime like Cry had predicted, but another hunter corrects him, saying Cry warned them about a creature that was slime-like. Citri arrives explaining the creature has a magical barrier, and she notes Cry sent her because he thought things might become dangerous. She describes how the slime creates a strong force field that deflects arrows and counters magic, and she thinks they wouldn't encounter a phantom like this even in a level 8 vault. She notices the slime dissolving its own body to convert mana material into magical energy, so she explains it's trying to replenish itself by absorbing her mana, since she has the highest mana concentration among them all. She continues to dodge all its attacks and gets close to the creature, asking Sven for his help as she tosses another container toward the slime. So he shoots it with his arrow, and the slime is instantly dissolved. Citri reveals the container had an anti-mana material, and Gark also arrives there wearing his armor, which surprises Sven, but Citri notes that Gark gave her a lift, since she can't run like Liz. Meanwhile, at the Akashic Tower base, Noctis is shocked that Citri managed to defeat the demonized phantom so easily, and he remembers Sophia warning them about her abilities. Citri briefs the hunters on her investigation into the Akashic Tower and Noctis, explaining that they have been researching ways to manipulate vaults. They remind her that Noctis was banished from the capital, but she reveals she has done thorough research, and she notes the phantom they faced was most likely a product of the Akashic Tower's experiments. Talia thinks there must be an underground device involved, and Citri agrees, because creating such monsters would require significant equipment. She worries that there may be more monsters like the one they defeated, and she admits she only had one stick of anti-mana, which she has already used. She notes that she isn't a good fighter, but she's determined to do her best, and thinks that with everyone's help, they will be okay. Later on, Henrik praises Citri in front of Sven, but he warns him to be cautious because he considers her a powerful weakling. He notes she's one of the grieving souls, so she'll do anything to survive, even if it means devouring him. Meanwhile, at the Akashic Tower base, the mages tell Flick that Sophia has ordered them to release the demonized phantoms one by one, but they believe it will only help the hunters defeat them more easily. Flick notes that Sophia is just a researcher, and she has no combat experience, so they try to contact her, but they can't reach her. He mentions that even though they're well prepared, if the one leading them is incompetent, it won't mean anything. The mages remind him that the Master gave Sophia full authority, but he thinks what really matters is winning, so Flick orders them to release all the phantoms at once, thinking it will overwhelm their enemies. Meanwhile, on the surface, the hunters interrogate the captured mages and learn that a single injection can create a monster. Citri asks if they're working for Noctis, promising to guarantee their safety if they answer, but the mages refuse to betray their master, which confirms her suspicion about their connection to the Akashic Tower. She mentions that she knows how to make them talk and pulls out a tube, which the others recognize as a brainwashing potion, and they tell her to stop, saying that using such a potion is a war crime, so she drinks the liquid herself and explains that it was just colored water, but she really just has a resistance to it. The demonized phantoms soon arrive, and the captured mages try to scare the hunters. Sven asks Citri how they can defeat them, and she explains that the phantoms have several barriers, so they must figure out the attributes of the barriers to know how to break through them. Sven observes Citri's calmness, and he notices the phantom is much faster than the previous one they faced. Citri tells the shield bearers to stand at the front, so they can check the direction of the phantom's force field, but she warns them to drop their shields as soon as they make contact. The phantom attacks, and one of the hunters loses his arm despite Citri's warning, so she tells the others to focus on the monster, but their attacks prove useless because the phantom's force field rotates, allowing it to dodge everything. She analyzes the situation and concludes that physical attacks, including Gark's axe, won't work, so he wonders if they should wait for the phantom's mana to run out, but Citri disagrees, saying it would take at least an hour, and Sven finally understands why Cry wanted Ark to handle the mission. As they debate on their next move, another phantom appears, making their escape seem impossible, but Citri suddenly gets an idea and notices a major flaw in the Akashic Tower's approach. She calls the mages back, ordering them to stop attacking, and to everyone's surprise, the phantoms start attacking each other instead of the hunters. Citri explains that the phantoms instinctively target humans to replenish their mana, but without hunters attacking them, the only other mana sources are the other phantoms themselves, because they are basically lumps of mana material. The hunters watch in amazement as the phantoms destroy one another, while the mages are unable to understand what went wrong. Meanwhile, at the Akashic Tower base, Noctis is furious with Flick and the others since they went against Sophia's orders. Sophia defends herself, saying that while she lacks battle experience, her orders are never without reason. Noctis tries to stay positive and points out that their fighting strength isn't limited to the phantoms. He asks Sophia what they should do next, and she notes that Citri and Gark have also joined the hunters, so the situation has changed. She thinks they can't afford to retreat, and she reminds them of the captured mages, worrying they might reveal information about the tower. Flick thinks the mages won't betray them, but Sophia believes Citri will still soon locate their base, so they'll need to unleash the Malice Eater to crush the hunters. Noctis reminds her that the Malice Eater is still in training, and someone will need to control it, so Sophia tells Flick to take charge, saying it's his chance to prove his worth. Talia admires Citri for never giving up, thinking she's a true genius, but seeing her makes her feel jealous, because she thinks she can never reach her level. Sven notices Talia deep in thought, and he asks if something is bothering her. He wonders if it's because her slime repellent failed, but she denies it, and he tries to cheer her up, saying Cry should have warned them it wasn't a regular slime. He also mentions how the mages keep staring at her, thinking it might be because of her red hair. Gark thinks they might need to retreat, but Citri surprises him by saying that she has found the location of the enemy base. She explains the exact spot where she believes they are hidden, based on the presence of mana and a number of other factors. She asks the mages if she's correct, so they lie and tell her she's wrong, but it only confirms her suspicion. They note that they must go on the offensive before Noctis escapes, but the mages tell them their master isn't there, and they call for Sophia to stop the hunters. Sven wonders who Sophia is, so Citri mentions she's her arch-nemesis, and she vows to capture both her and Noctis, saying that their research will continue unless they're stopped. She admits she failed to capture Sophia in the past due to her incompetence, but she swears to put her away the next time they meet. Meanwhile, Cry and the others approach the den, but he isn't happy because he had planned to arrive only after everything was over. Liz tells them to hurry, believing Citri might die without them, but Cry doubts it, thinking that the only one who might die is himself, since he hasn't charged his relics and doesn't have any safety rings. Tino mentions they have almost arrived, but it's too dark for Cry to see anything. Tino tries to use the chance to hold his hand, but Liz refuses to let her touch him. Meanwhile, Gain regrets not trusting Cry, because if he had, he wouldn't have gotten so wrecked. Citri notes that Cry is a genius who might one day reach level 10, which makes Gain even more eager to meet him. Gain assumes Cry must be incredibly strong, but Citri explains that strength isn't everything, and even if Cry were weaker than a sand rabbit in combat, it still wouldn't matter. A bolt of lightning suddenly strikes them from the sky, and Flick appears riding the Malice Eater. He thinks he has redeemed himself by taking them all out, but Citri is unharmed by the attack and dismisses his spell as basic magic, since she's used to that level of power when she's with the other grieving souls. She uses a water gun to shoot Sven with a healing potion, instantly reviving him. He gets up and charges at Flick, knocking him out, but the monster proves to be too powerful, and he's almost killed, but Gark arrives just in time and kills the monster in one hit. Noctis is disappointed in Flick, since he didn't follow the orders once again, noting he only took one Malice Eater when he was supposed to take more. His followers begin to lose hope, wondering if Cry planned everything from the start, so they consider deploying all their remaining Malice Eaters, but Noctis stops them, mentioning that they still have Sophia and their final trump card. We see that Citri and the others have made it to outside the Akashic Tower base. Sven prepares to enter, but Gark volunteers to take the lead, since he wants to prove Liz wrong about him being washed. Meanwhile, Cry's party observes the effects of Flick's lightning, and Liz notes that it was average, but Tio can't believe that she thinks that an attack on such a scale is only average. We see the hunters going up against the Akashic mages, but Noctis unleashes his trump card, an enormous golem named Akasha, and he calls it the culmination of all their research. Gark manages to block its attack, but the other hunters struggle against the Malice Eaters, and the captured mages escape during the chaos. Gain thinks they should retreat, but Sven gets hit, and things are looking bad, but one of the Malice Eaters is suddenly taken out, as Liz suddenly appears, and the other hunters get fired up seeing they have reinforcements. Meanwhile, we see Cry left with Tino, and he worries about losing Liz as his bodyguard. Tino senses something nearby, but Cry thinks they should just ignore it, but the mages wonder what he is thinking, since they think he should be aware of them. Liz takes out another Malice Eater, and she teases Citri for struggling against such weak creatures. She starts attacking the golem, but it's able to withstand her attacks. Gark swings his axe at it, but it jumps up to avoid it. Sven sees that it looks similar to the Grieving Soul Ansem, and Liz wonders why the golem was modeled after him. She continues her attack, but the golem pulls out a gun and lands a blast on her. It starts chasing after her, and Citri thinks it's a bad matchup for Liz, so she thinks they need to just wait for the golem to run out of energy, but Liz insists on destroying it. She delivers another attack, kicking it down, and Gark freezes its leg, but it's able to stop itself from falling. Liz gets annoyed, noting that her time is up, and Sven wonders what she means, but Cry and Tino suddenly appear. She notes that she wanted to finish things before he arrived, and Citri realizes it's over. The golem starts to charge at him, but he can't actually see it in the dark. It prepares to attack him, but it suddenly gets blown away, and the fight appears to be over. Liz wonders what he did to it, but he doesn't even know what happened. After that, it seems the Akashic Tower mages were able to escape, but their research and materials are all confiscated. Citri thanks Cry for his help, and he wonders how things are going with her nemesis, but she thinks about handling it on her own. Meanwhile, the captured mages regroup with Noctis, and they tell him that Sophia has infiltrated the hunters. Noctis wonders about what she's thinking, but he struggles to read Cry's intentions, so he decides they can't risk it, so they need to just leave the capital, and he tells his men to call Sophia back. Meanwhile at the association, Gark demands to know what Cry knows, but he swears that he knows nothing. He thinks they should talk to Citri since she was in charge of the mission, but the official is hesitant about questioning her. He even notes that there was an incident 3 years ago where there was a mass prison breakout and all the evidence pointed to Citri, but she got off thanks to Gark, who thought it was ridiculous for her to be involved. Talia is brought to Noctis, and he tells her to drop her act. He tells her they're leaving, but she has no idea what he's talking about. They wonder if she's using a spell to avoid suspicion, but they notice the Malice Eater is aggressive towards her, so they realize she's not Sophia. The real Sophia appears, and Noctis wonders why there's a girl that looks just like her, but she explains that she's the one who's the copy. She reveals herself to actually be Citri, and Noctis wonders what she's doing pretending to be Sophia, but she explains that Sophia never existed, and it was always her from the beginning. Flick thinks she was planning to betray them, but she notes she became a disciple like all of them because she was drawn by Noctis's abilities. She mentions she respects his relentless dedication, and she's thankful for all the equipment and materials, but she thinks the jig is up, and she thinks Cry letting them go was his warning to her to stop what she's doing. Noctis thinks she must have leaked their research to Cry, but she mentions that he's just able to see through everything. She thinks he organized everything while she was away, sending high-level hunters to help test the fruits of her research. She reveals that she was the one who made the golem jump back, because she thinks the battle would have led to too many casualties. She tells them all that they will all be captured as criminals, but she tells them not to worry, since she will carry on their research. Flick orders the Malice Eater to attack her, but it doesn't work, so Noctis blasts her with his flames, but she emerges unharmed, and he can't believe his attack had no effect, but she reveals that her slime absorbed the blast. She gets excited to test it out, and the mages tell Noctis to run while they hold it back. We see him about to get away, but he gets pushed back by a cloaked figure, so he burns it with his flames, but it turns out to be a jacked monster. Noctis freaks out seeing it, and Citri notes that as the weakest member of the Grieving Souls, she had to quickly gain power. She mentions that creating a golem took too much time and resources, so she made a chimera instead. She reveals she was behind the mass prison break incident, mentioning it was all so she could get the parts she needed. She calls it Killiam, and Noctis thinks she's insane, but it ends up finishing him off. After that, Cry asks about what happened to Talia, but Citri notes she just had some memory loss. She thinks it's a shame how everything turned out, but Cry has no idea what she's talking about, so he just agrees with her. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.